Good afternoon, SunRiver St. George. It's my privilege to welcome you to this special presentation today. The slideshow that we've been seeing has documented the tragedy that happened in our history, and we've come here today to listen to an individual who can help us to understand how we need to treat ourselves and one another so that such a human tragedy never happens again, especially in our life, but never in the future again. It's my honor I'm not going to introduce Ben Lesser. I'm going to turn the time over now to Ann Raskin, who will give us an introduction and give us an idea as to the outlay of this program. So Ann, please come up.
Hi, welcome. I'm Ann Raskin. I've been a friend of Ben Lesser and his daughter Gail for over 20 years now, and he has inspired my life, as I know he will inspire your life today. I just wanted to let you know the agenda today. First, housekeeping things. You know where the restrooms are outside this door and to the left, and cell phones turned off would be appreciated. For the presentation today, I always like to know what to expect. So first of all, I'm going to be introducing Gail to you, and Gail, his daughter, is going to explain what you found on your seats today. After that, we are going to watch a film about Ben, introducing Ben, and then Ben will be up on stage, and Ben will speak for about an hour and 40 minutes. So be ready. You won't want to leave your seats, I'm sure. Ben's story is going to start with the occupation by the Nazis and go to his liberation. After that, Gail is going to talk to you about Ben's foundation, his nonprofit, Zahor Foundation, Remembrance Foundation, and the things that they've accomplished. After that, just indulge with me, I am going to show you about 6 minutes of video. I'm working on a documentary for Ben, so I'm just going to show you that. And after that, we'll have question and answers if you want to stay to ask questions. So, Gail, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ben's little girl, and 66 years old. At your seats, you received something that is called I Shout Out. The I Shout Out is an online program that is part of our website that I hope you introduce your friends, family, grandchildren, children to. We are trying to get 6 million I Shout Outs to be the voice for the voices that do not have a voice anymore, whether it's that you believe in against bigotry, to love thy neighbor, against hatred, against anti-Semitism, whatever it is, you could go onto our website and mark there what you believe in, or you could believe in all of them. You can put your picture, have your grandchildren put their picture. Ben has built the website so it will last there. The photo will last there for generations to come, and they'll be able, especially your grandchildren, will be able to show their children one day. You also have a pin with our business card. Everything you could get, all the information you could get is on our business card about the foundation. We also have our curriculum, so if any of you are teachers or just history buffs, we have an incredible curriculum that is free for anybody, so please check us out. Besides that, we have a Zahor pin. Now, to tell you the truth, if you put it so it looks like a 7, that's the right way up. The word is a Hebrew word, and Zahor means remember. Remember the Holocaust. Today you're going to hear an incredible story, and along with this story goes along with this pin goes this story. So you have a job to do. When you sit down with your family or friends and tell them about this incredible story that you heard today, pass the pin forward, and may the pin continue passing on along with the story. And even if one of your grandchildren find it in a drawer long from now, they'll know that you met a Holocaust survivor. Also, I wanted to mention real quick, because I don't know if Ben will have time to go into it, but Ben is wearing a Medal of Honor that he received last March. This Medal of Honor was given to him by Germany. This is the highest and the most honorable medal somebody could receive from the government that a civilian can receive. And this is for what he has given to the world in the way of education. So this was actually given to him by the president, and then also the neighboring in Los Angeles. It was actually presented through him through the Consulate General's offices. But it is the Cross Order of Merit from Germany, and he wears it with great pride today. So he's just wearing it almost a year. Well, without any further ado, I will bring Anne up here to move you forward.
I said I've known Ben for 20 years, and I met him when I was teaching, and he would come to speak with my students. I saw how their lives were changed. And for those of you who don't know Ben, we have a short video that tells you who Ben is. So we're going to watch that now. Thank you.
It's human nature to want to live. You know your life is at stake, any minute you could be killed. You lived from minute to minute and prayed a lot, hope that nothing would happen to you. My life to end this hatred. When we educate, we can prevent, and then we will ultimately prevail. This is a message to all your students. It's possible to let tragedy or trauma become a reason to stop living. But it's also possible to live through extreme circumstances and commit to a life that has meaning, a life that matters. My dear departed one, all 6 million of them are crying out to the world in a single word. Zachor, remember us. We were here.
Just to let you know, there are over 245,000 Holocaust survivors alive in the world today. I checked, and there are 2 survivors in Utah. One lives in Salt Lake City, and he's 95. The other one is here with us today, and it's Ben Lesser. I'm honored to present Ben Lesser.
Thank you very much. A nice crowd. I'm sure there's some GIs, some of you who give service to our country, perhaps even some of you that are my liberators. I want to thank you for your service, and I do appreciate it. Coming to my story, you know, when you talk about 6 million people, to most of us it's a big number. But imagine this. Dallas Football Stadium is the biggest football stadium in the world. It holds 70,000 people. Imagine 70 of those. Can you picture that? Everybody dead. And the world was silent. We now know that the whole world knew what was happening to the Jewish people, but they chose to be silent, giving Hitler carte blanche to do with him anything he wished, and he did. 6 million of us. 1.5 million of whom were children, and the world was silent. I shiver whenever I think about it. I come to you from a family of 7, a wonderful family of 7. You can see my father, Lazar, my mother, Shari, and Moishi, my oldest brother, and then there was my sister, Lola, my oldest sister, Goldie. The middle picture is myself when I was 12 years old. It's the only picture I have of me during that period. And my little brother, Tuli. Out of all these people, only 2 of us survived. My sister Lola in the corner and I. The rest of them were all slaughtered by the Nazis. Yes, my friend, I was born in Krakow, Poland. It was a beautiful city, and we lived in Krakow, Poland, in a beautiful apartment house. In a beautiful apartment house, and that it was 3 stories, and on the bottom, my bottom right, were the 3 windows as part of our bedroom. And there was another Jewish couple on the other side of the gate with the 2 windows there.
Excuse me, Ben?
That was...
Ben?
Yeah.
Talk into the microphone. I will point at the screen. You talk into the microphone.
Okay. All right, I'm talking on the microphone. Anyway, one early in the morning, the whole building started to shake and rattle. So I ran to the window. It was this window here in my bedroom to see what was happening, and I saw tanks were rolling down the street. And following the tanks, there were half-tracks, and every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half-track, get on the sidewalk, and this is how they occupied the city. There was no fighting at all. After they passed, my father called us kids into the dining room, set us down in chairs, and said to us, okay, from this moment on, there are no more kids. You're all adults. You're going to obey, you're going to listen, no back talk. And this is what happened. We grew up overnight. 5 days later, a truck pulls up to the gate early in the morning, full of soldiers, and they're banging on the gate. The super came running out, what's happening, and all they wanted to know is where the Jewish people lived. He was quick to oblige. He told them that the lessers, we lived on one side, and this other couple on the other side. Well, they came breaking down the door and pistol whipping us. We were still in bed, it was 5 a.m., pistol whipping us and screaming to throw in all of our valuables into their sacks. Money, gold, silver, anything they could find of value, they threw in. And they're beating up my father to open up the safe. While my father's trying to open the safe, we hear this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I went through the kitchen door into the yard, into their kitchen door, and we got inside to see what's going on. And this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy by its legs and swinging him, and yelling to the parents, make him shut up. Of course, the parents and the daughters were yelling, our baby, don't hurt our baby. With a smirk on his face, you can see he was enjoying what he was doing. He smashes the baby's head into a doorpost, killing it instantly. It's a memory I could never forget. I have nightmares over this. Of course, we all jumped on this monster, and the other soldiers heard what something is going on. They came running in, and they were a little shocked themselves. This was only 5 days after the occupation of Krakow, to see this infant and what came out of his head, my God. They said to him, okay, Hans, let's go. They pulled us off him, and they told him they threw everything in a sack, all the valuables, and threw it in the truck and took off. That was the 5th day after occupation. And from that day on, things started to get much worse. New ordinances started to coming in. We had to wear a Star of David from the age of 4 on up. And we had a curfew. You couldn't be on the street from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. And you couldn't travel here. You couldn't go to this restaurant. You couldn't be on this street. One ordinance after another. And the strange thing is that for the Jewish people, there were no judges, no juries, not even prisons. If they found you disobeying any of this order, they simply shot you. And every morning you'd find people laying on the street. There was no accountability. They can kill you just because they feel like it. Some of them just enjoyed killing, and no one could stop them.
They can kill all they want. Well, this went on for about a few months, and then a new ordinance came in. The Jewish people may no longer reside in Krakow, but they gave us a choice. If you wish to stay in Krakow, you have to go into a ghetto. They made a ghetto, and I hope you know what a ghetto is. It was a terrible place. But the choice was you can move into a small community neighboring Krakow, but you can't live in the city. So my father was getting ready to go into the ghetto. His family, numbering over 200, they all went into the ghetto. When a young man approaches my father, his name is Michael Lieber. He says, "Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola, my sister Lola. I'm in love with her. Someday I'd love to marry her, but do me a favor, come to the same community that my family is moving to." Well, my father gave him a choice to go into the ghetto or to that community called Niepolomice. He chose to go to Niepolomice. As it turned out, a few months later, all the people in the ghetto were put on trains and taken to a camp called Belzec, and everyone was killed. My father's family, my grandparents, everybody was killed. So that was a big miracle that Michael fell in love with my sister. That saved us once. And then we were packing the wagon, a horse and buggy driver and a wagon, packing all our goods to go to that small community. Now, we couldn't take any furniture or anything like that. It had to be left. That's when we found out that my father had 1,000 American dollars, said he saved up for a rainy day. That was a lot of money in those days. He took the money and he pasted it into a religious book, prayer book, and he put it in a sack full of other religious books. And we took off. About an hour out of the city, we were being stopped. Halt! Two husky Nazis jumped on the wagon, and all they wanted to know, do we have any Jewish literature, books? And they saw 2 sacks full of books. They picked them up and heaped it on the side of the road. They had a mountain full of books. It seems like everyone who didn't go into the ghetto had to cross this road. And they were confiscating all these books. They were going to have a bonfire after everybody left. My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German. And she walks up to this monster and says, "Look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book." He looked at her, maybe he liked the way she spoke German. He says, "Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes if we can find it." The whole family was climbing on this mountain with the books, and all these books looked alike. They were either brown or black, leather bound, After 5 minutes, he chased us away. My father was penniless, and he's got a family of 6. Said he's going to a new community, not like he can get a job because Jewish people are not allowed to be hired. You couldn't recognize my father. We were a family of 7, but my oldest sister, Goldie, was caught when the war broke out at her grandparents in Munkacs. Munkacs was under Hungarian rule, and Hungary was a free country, so she was pretty safe there. But my father had 6 people he had to feed, and he doesn't have a penny. And we arrived at this house that Michael rented, and 1/2 of it for us, the other half the orchard farmer owned it. In between the 2 apartments, there was a baking oven. My future brother-in-law, when he found out what happened to my father, brought him a sack full of flour, figuring he'll be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. And those ingredients he had. Then he took those pretzels to the neighboring bars and offered it for sale. And they were buying it. It was a novelty. So now my father becomes a little baker in that community. He baked bread, he baked challah, he baked cookies, rolled cakes, all kind of different goodies. And one of those items was mandel bread. I'm sure that most of you know what it is. To this day, I still love to bake. And remember, I was 12 years old. There was no recipe, and we had to find the right taste. So I had to do a lot of baking to finally come up with the right taste. Anyway, this baking was going on for about a year, and my sister Lola and Michael get married. They got married, and these people are the wedding guests. And out of all these people, only 3 of us, Michael, Lola, and I, only the 3 of us survived. Everybody else was killed. My little brother is leaning against my mother. None of them survived. But Michael and Lola get married and they move into a duplex. The owner of the duplex happened to be the mayor of Nepolomice, the mayor of that community. One evening he comes home and he says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there's going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night. Well, the minute Michael heard it, he went out and he rented a driver with a wagon, and we just snuck out that evening. We snuck out. Now, only place we can go was the nearest city, and that was called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. That meant we had to go inside a ghetto. And Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come in the ghetto in the middle of the night, and they would go from house to house, pull out the children from their beds, and throw them into these dump trucks. And after they filled up these dump trucks, they would pull out of the ghetto. Obviously, the parents were running behind these trucks and screaming for their children. The children are screaming for their parents. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck. And they mowed down the parents running behind it. That resonated throughout Europe. Stay away from Bochnia ghetto because of these atrocities. But we had no choice. And it's a good thing we left Neapolomice, because that night there was a raid, and all the Jewish people were put into trucks and taken to the forest. The men were given shovels to dig a ditch, and everyone was shot. How do we know this? Lola and I are the only survivors from our family. We went back to Neapolomice after the war to find out what happened to all the people, all the Jewish people. The farmers who would go into the forest early in the morning to pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market saw everything that was happening. They saw those trucks come in and they saw them shooting everybody. They were hiding behind trees, and they were telling us that the ground was moving for 3 days afterwards. They didn't care if you're alive or dead. They buried you. So we found this out. Now we are in Bochnia ghetto. The driver unloads us in the middle of the street. And we are sitting there when Michael sees a young man by the name of Farber. Farber happened to be a school buddy of his that he remembers, and Farber is saying to him, "What are you doing here in the middle of the street?" So Michael tells him the story. And Farber happened to be a Jewish policeman inside the ghetto. They had Jewish policemen. They didn't have any weapons. All they had was a baton. Their job was to keep order inside the ghetto. That's all. So he took Michael and his family and Lola to an apartment someplace. And then, just to give you an idea of what ghetto living was like, then he took my father, my mother, myself, and my little brother to another room. There were 8 other people in this room. So now we were 12. No beds. All they had was straw on the ground. And on top of the straw there were blankets. There were blankets hanging from the ceiling, separating each family. And we were in this one room, 12 of us now. Anyway, Farber, by the way, everybody had to work in ghetto. If you didn't work, you didn't get any rations. My job, I was 12 years old, and my job was working in a uniform factory. I was sewing on buttons on uniforms. It was easy enough work, but it was 13 hours a day, very little food and little sleep. That went on for over a year. And then Farber tells Michael, save yourself. I heard there's going to be a raid tonight or tomorrow night inside the ghetto. So ever since those dump trucks would come in and pick out the children from their beds, every house in every apartment had a hiding place. They called it bunkers. So that's when we found out that our bunker was this ornate piece of furniture where you hang your coats and jackets. That was the hiding place for the 12 of us. You opened the door, you pushed the clothing apart, the back panel would slide apart, there was a hole in the wall, and the 12 of us could crawl through that hole. The last person would have to close the door of this piece of furniture, put the closing back in place, close the back panel, and we stood there all night long, freezing cold. It was snowing, and the ceiling was open between the two buildings. But lucky for us, the street part was connected, so they didn't see us. And we were there all night long, and we heard the screams, the shooting, the yelling, the dogs barking all night long. Towards morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, we dared to come out. And when we came out, we couldn't believe what our eyes are seeing. We saw dead people torn apart by dogs laying in the snow. A mother and infant torn apart, you couldn't see them, and just couldn't recognize them. And people were going around with push carts and picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies, placing them on the push carts, and then they would take him into the ghetto square, and they would pile them up as high as possible. Then these cultured people would come with gasoline cans, pour gasoline over the people. And guess what? They started a human bonfire in Bochnia Ghetto Square. Can you imagine the smell, the stench, the ashes, what was really going on? And I knew that my sister Lola and her husband and his family are hiding in a doghouse. You heard right, a doghouse. When you lift the floor from the doghouse, there was a step ladder down there with provisions. They had provisions for 7 people to hide. Bedding, food for 7 people. And as they were about to go into the doghouse, another Jewish policeman walks up with his mother and his sister. And he says to Michael, Michael, I know about your hiding place in the doghouse. Unless you take my mother and my sister along, I'm going to tell the authorities. Well, now they had no choice. there was only room for 7, and there were 9 now. So Michael and Lola decided to walk away so the other 7 could get down into this hiding place. As they're walking away, Farber, that friendly policeman, sees them. He says, "Michael, why aren't you hiding someplace?" He tells him what Morris Schiller did, and now they walked away. So he tells him, "Don't worry, where my sister and her 2 children are hiding, there is room for you. Follow me." And they followed them to a leather factory, a tannery. And above the tannery, or next to the tannery, there was a water tank. He says, "My sister and her 2 children are inside that water tank. You can climb up on a ladder on one side and lower yourself with the rope down, and you're going to see my sister. Towards morning, when the coast is clear, I'll give you a signal on the tank, and knocking. You will know the coast is clear, you'll have to come out." Well, Lola's now telling the story. They lowered themselves into the tank. They saw his sister is standing knee-deep in water. And his little daughter is standing waist-high in water. The mother is holding an infant little boy sound asleep, and they're all shivering and shaking. Michael picked up the little girl from the floor, and Lola picked up the infant little boy from the mother, and all of them stood there shivering and shaking all night long. There were little mice or rats swimming around in the water, nibbling at their feet. It was unbelievable. And this screaming all night long, they heard the same thing we heard, shooting, screaming. Towards morning it got quiet, and Farber gave the signal for them to come out. As they came out, and they put some circulation back into their legs, the first thing Michael and Lola wanted to do is go to the doghouse to find out what has happened to his family. And when he came to the doghouse, this is what he found. Everybody was laying in the snow with a bullet in the head. Lola, when she saw that, she started to scream. There's little Marika, his sister, her 7th birthday, Lola made her a doll. She's still holding on to the doll. And Michael stopped her. He says, "You can't cry loud because they might still be burning bodies. They're going to hear you." So with a quelched cry, they knew what they had to do. You see, according to the Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your loved ones within 12 or 24 hours. Michael, being a religious man, he went out and he found a rickety wheelbarrow. He put the family on the wheelbarrow, and they pushed the bodies up to the cemetery on top of the hill. Marika's still holding on the doll. At the cemetery, they found a shovel, and Lola, with her bare hands in frozen ground, they were able to dig out a hole big enough for the family. They placed the family inside. I need the next picture.
I'm sorry, I'm having issues here.
Cemetery. At the cemetery. There we go. They put the family in the ground. When Morris Schiller walks up to them, he says, it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't his fault, because his own mother and his own sister were also killed. However, he says, that grave that you just dug out for your family, you're going to have to take your family out of there, because I want it for my mother and my sister. Well, Lola started to cry, and Michael says, look, he's got the power over us. And they took everybody out of the grave and put them back on the wheelbarrow, and they found another spot by a fence, and they buried the family. While they were doing this, they hear a Jeep is coming up the hill, and they stop right at the cemetery door. Two husky Nazis jump out of the Jeep, and they yell out, Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller. And he hears that, so he runs up to them and says, "Jawohl, here I am." They pull out a revolver and they shot him. This is what they did to people who have seen too much. Anyway, Michael and Lola, after they went away, went down the hill, holding each other and crying. And I don't know if I have enough time, Gail, to talk about...
This is important. Yes. Yes, just go through it.
How we got out of the ghetto.
Oh.
How we got out of the ghetto is a long story. And we took 55 people with us, and we were able to get out of the ghetto. It's a very interesting story. You really have to read it in my book. It's too long for me to tell you, but we were 55 people with us outside the ghetto. And Michael befriends a truck driver who was hauling coal. And he asked him if he would convert his truck into a double-decker where there's coal on top, and between the coal and the chassis there's room for people to hide. And he would take us to the Czech border where the smuggler will be waiting for us, but he'll get paid a lot of money. Anyway, he listened to us. He converted his truck into a double-decker. Now, he takes the first group of people, first 10 survivors, to go to the border. And Michael and Lola were first to go with 8 other people. There was one rich family who paid for us, only 2 of us in each trip, and 8 of their family. So Michael and Lola decided to go first because you couldn't always trust these drivers. They would take your money and turn you into the Gestapo and then they get paid ransom money for turning in Jews trying to escape. So we made up that first group. When the driver comes back with the right passport, then you can trust him. If he doesn't have the right passport, don't trust him anymore. Anyway, 2 days later, the driver came back with the right passport. Now it was time for another 10 people to go in there. Like sardines, 5 and 5. You can't imagine, you can't turn. It was so tight. Anyway, my little brother and I, my father insisted that we should go next. So my little brother and I and 8 other people. And I remember my little brother is facing me and I'm laying on a side like this, like sardines, 5 and 5. About an hour out of the city, we're being stopped out, and we see a bunch of soldiers with their rifles. We figured, oh, somebody turned us in, they're gonna kill us. And they're talking to the driver. We couldn't hear because the roar of the engine was so loud, what they were saying. But then the truck started to move, and we felt relieved until we saw from the cracks of the truck that on each step there is a soldier with a rifle. And now we hear soldiers walking on top of the coal. And we are holding our breath. The coal dust is starting to filter through. My little brother is about to sneeze, and I'm holding his nose in his mouth. 2 hours they were riding with us, and then they left. We already made our prayers, they're gonna kill us. And all of a sudden we hear, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. They were just hitchhiking. Talk about miracles. Soldiers with their rifles sitting on top of our coals. And we were underneath 10 Jewish people and they had no idea. No idea. You know, there were miracles after miracles. Life, we can't explain it. We can't explain it. I feel that God needed a witness, somebody who can talk about it. He let me live. And all those miracles that were happening were all looked like to save my life. Anyway, we arrive at nighttime at the forest, and he unloads us. He tells us, go up the hill about 300 yards, you will see a tool shed. Inside the tool shed is the smuggler waiting for you, which we did. We went up, and he happened to be a forest ranger, also a smuggler. And he was happy to see us, and he took us in the middle of the forest, and he told us to lay down on our stomach, look up, and we saw soldiers walking back and forth with their dogs. And he was telling us at 3 a.m. they're going to go down the hill where they meet fresh soldiers, and they have a little ceremony, and then the fresh soldiers come up. But there's about 10 minutes times that we can cross the border, but we have to be very quiet. So after they came down, out of sight, we shimmied our way up to the border. He picked up the barbed wire, told us to cross, and he told us that at the end of this mountain there's a big drop, and if you fall down or tumble, it's all over. They're gonna hear you. Sit down at the end of the mountain, hold hands, and slide down quietly. It was pitch black. You couldn't see your arm in front of you. We crossed this wire. We sat down at the end of the mountain. It looks like a big hole, holding each other, and we started to slide down the mountain. And after a while, we hit a ravine, and we stopped. I asked my little brother, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yes." When somebody taps me on my shoulder, I jump out of my skin. Who in the hell in the middle of this wilderness? Who? And he says, "Bainish." No one except my immediate family called me Bainish. Otherwise I was Benek or Bundy. So Ben, but Bainish, he says, "I'm your Uncle Belo. I came here to save you across the border. Your mother's brother, Belo." I says, "Uncle, how did you know where to find me here in the middle of nowhere?" He says, when Lola and Michael went through 2 days earlier, they contacted him and they told him the exact spot. So he waited for us. Now we had to cross another border from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. Hungary was a free country, Czechoslovakia was not. So this is a long story. I'll only tell you, read about it in the book, believe me. It's not just that I want to sell the books, but it's a beautiful story how we were able to cross another border and wind up in Budapest. In Budapest, we saw Michael and Lola waiting for us. We embraced. Well, we had to go to Munkács. Munkács is where my oldest sister, Goldie, was waiting for me. And my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, my cousin, everybody from my mother's side of the family. And we got on a train in Budapest and we went to Munkács. And of course, we were so happy. We embraced the whole family. And one uncle asked me and my little brother to stay with in his house. He was a wealthy man. He had a dry goods store where he would sell fabric for suits and dresses, and he had a house above the store. He was a wealthy man. So anyway, in Hungary, things were going on like nothing ever happened. People were going to prayer, people were going to dances and to nightclubs, and I tell them what happened in Poland. Most of them didn't believe it. And those who did told me, well, this will never happen in Hungary because Hungary is an ally of Germany, so we're safe here. But it wasn't so. And meanwhile, we're waiting for my father and mother. They were the next ones with another group of 8 people supposed to come across. We wait and wait. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Finally, somebody came across the border who knew what happened. He told us the story as my parents were about to go into the dump trucks. A farmer, a Polish farmer, saw what happened. He called the Gestapo. They came and they pulled everybody out. They lined them up against the wall, and everybody, all 10 survivors, my parents included, and the driver who was not Jewish, so 11 people were lined up against the wall, and everybody was shot. Everybody was shot. That was it. Now they're pulling him out. All those pictures that you see were drawn by my sister Lola 5 years after liberation, from memory. She was an artist, great artist. That's a separate story. But now we're in Munkac about 3 or 4 months. It was 4 or 5 months maybe. But it was in March of 1944, the Nazis marched into Hungary like they were invited guests. And the minute they walked in, they knew every Jewish person, their names, their address, their education, everything. The question is how the Hungarian gendarmes helped. And they told the Germans everything that they knew. And they came out with the ordinance that all the Jewish people will be relocated into Germany. Because Germany needed workers. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry, but leave everything else behind. This was their orders. And most people, if not all, believed what they were saying. They're going to be relocated to Germany. It made sense because Germany needed workers. Most people were fighting in the army. They needed workers. And they said men and women who are able will be working. Children will be schooled. Older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry. And people brought along valises and bundles, all kind of things. And they marched us out to the railroad station. At the railroad station, they counted 80 to a cattle car. And before we were ordered to go in, I see 2 men on a stretcher, and there was a woman on the stretcher. They're carrying the stretcher up to my feet, they laid it down, and I take a look, I see a woman bloodied, then I realize it's my sister Goldie. Her beautiful face, he couldn't see it. I says, what happened to you? She says she tried to escape, and she went as far as the railroad station. A Hungarian gendarme who went to school with her recognized her. He turned her into the SS. They beat her to a pulp. And now they're ordering us to get in these cattle cars. 80 to a cattle car. Might not be so bad if it were not for the fact that everybody had a bundle. Now it was so tight that you couldn't sit down. You wanted to sit down, somebody else had to stand up. It was unbelievable. There were 2 buckets of water there. Once the water was gone, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. 80 people, 1 day, 2 days. Can you imagine how it was like? They started to use those buckets. The water was gone. 3rd day, the buckets were overflowing. And human waste is all over. There was no room to sit down, we had to stand. No food. You can't describe the conditions. And human waste was all over the floor. Finally, we arrived at a place, a railroad station, and it says Oświęcim. Oświęcim was Polish for Auschwitz. None of us knew about an Auschwitz. We had no idea, but we knew we were still in Poland, someplace in Poland. Oświęcim is a Polish city. And the train kept going for another couple of 100 yards, and it stopped. And we see a gate. It says, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives you freedom. And that is the gate of Auschwitz. But we had no idea about Auschwitz, Oświęcim, nothing. 2 hours later, the train starts to move again. And they go for another 3 kilometers to a place called Birkenau. Now, Birkenau was part of Auschwitz. Birkenau was where most of the killing was done, in the gas chambers. Auschwitz had 1 gas chamber, 1 crematorium. Birkenau had 5 of them. And they tell us to get out of this. They said men and women, women and children to the right and men to the left. I'm holding on to my sister and my little brother Tully, and they're just ripped away from me. They disappeared. And I was 15 and a half at the time. I could have gone with the children. I decided to go with my uncle and cousin as a man. The logic behind it was, well, if this is a labor camp, they probably want you to labor. And if you labor, you receive better rations. That was what I felt, and that's the reason I went with my uncle. That was another miracle, because had I gone with my sister and little brother, they went directly to the gas chambers. Who knew? Who knew? My sister Goldie would have normally been chosen to work, but the way she was beaten up, they looked at her, they sent her to the gas chambers. I don't know this, but we're standing in line, and it was looked like snowing. We didn't know it was ashes. You see 10 chimneys with flames shooting out of them. The men ahead of me were saying, "Oh, those must be smelting factories. This is probably where we will be working." Who knew that those were crematoriums? They were burning those ashes all over the place. Ashes of our dear departed ones. And it was a strange place. And there was a man dressed in a doctor's frock. This was Dr. Mengele, the angel of death. He decided who should live, who should die, with the flick of a finger, right, left, right, left. Yeah, that's Dr. Mengele. So when I come close to him, I hear him ask a young man, "Kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? Or would you rather go by truck?" He says he would rather go by truck because he had a bad knee. Poor soul, not realizing that meant certain death. But who knew? He sent him to the right. But I heard that and it didn't make sense to me. Why would he ask a question like that? Can you run 5 kilometers? I see the barracks are right here. I figured he's just testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. So I tell my uncle, my cousin, whatever he asks you, tell him you're strong, you're healthy, you can work, and you can run. But let me go first. And I walk up first, I stretch myself out. Remember, I was only 15 and a half. I walk up to him, salute him, and I said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy and I can work. So he did ask me, "Kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers? I said, "Jawohl." And he sent me to the left. My uncle and cousin, they followed, they all were sent to the left. Now they walk us, all us people who are on the left, they march us to a big auditorium, something like the size of this room. And they order us to get undressed, get out of your shoes, walk up to the line of barbers, they're going to cut your hair, then you're going to go into the showers. Well, if you remember, I had those black shoes with diamonds in them. So my uncle who gave me those shoes, he also had those shoes with diamonds on him, and his son, my cousin, they all got out of the shoes because we were ordered to get out. If you disobey an order, they shoot you. I decided to wear my shoes. If you can picture this, I'm naked, walking up to these barbers, and they cut my hair. They were not exactly gentle, but the way they cut is. Guards were walking back and forth and looking at us. It's like God blinded their eyes. They didn't say anything about my shoes. And the barbers didn't say anything about my shoes. And I'd walk into the showers with my shoes on. At the showers, they gave us fresh, different shoes wooden soles with canvas on top, and I got into those, and I put these shoes with the diamonds under my arm, and we walk out of the bath, shower, and they lead us to the barracks. They lead us to the barracks. This is the kind of shoe that they gave me. They lead us to the barrack. At the barrack we meet the Stubenmeltester, the man in charge of the barrack. He comes out, he counts us, and he talks to us in a broken German. I can tell he's a Polish inmate. So he says in German, he says, "Ha, you Hungarian Jews, you think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes, those flames? Those are your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave, you're going to wind up like that, ashes." I couldn't believe. My sister, my little brother, ashes. Who knew? Who knew? I thought for a minute maybe it's just pulling our leg. It can't be true. And he chased us in the barrack. He told us to take a bunk. My cousin, my uncle, and I took an upper bunk, a 3-layer bunk. We took an upper, and we fell asleep. We were so tired. We fell asleep. About an hour later, my cousin wakes me up. "Ben, get up, get up." I says, "What?" He says, "Listen." And I hear a chanting, a crying, or a laughing. I can't make it out. And then he says, "What? Look at this." The end of the barrack had some boards missing, and we see an orange shoe, like flame. "What is it?" I says, "I don't know, but I will ask the Stubenmeltester." I figured the Stubenmeltester is a Polish inmate, and I was from Poland. I came with the Hungarians. So I walk over to him, and I say, "Przepraszam bardzo, excuse me, sir, can you tell me what is going on here?" And I told him that sound, the singing or crying, and the flames. He was so happy to hear somebody speak his own language, because we're all Hungarian, and I was from Krakow, Poland, so I spoke his language. He couldn't stop telling me what was happening in Auschwitz to the Jewish people. He was telling me things. I could be here for another hour and talk about it, what was going on. He was telling me how long it takes to kill a person in the gas chamber. Only a half hour, or a little longer, depending on where you're standing in the gas chambers. And it was telling me that they are killing in Auschwitz between 25 and 35,000 people a day. A day. And he was telling me those were fiery pits that I hear, and we should be here crying. They were throwing in mostly children, infants and children alive into the fiery pits. Can you imagine that? And what we heard day and night crying and screaming was people being thrown into fiery pits. He was telling me a lot of details, but I really don't have the time to get into this. It was too gruesome to tell you. And for 2.5 weeks, what we went through in Auschwitz is unbelievable. Every morning we had to stand naked and in front of guards. German Nazis were going around and looking at us and counting us. And if they thought you too skinny, they would take you to the gas chambers. You never know. He didn't like your look. Take you to the gas chambers. And there was no escaping. There was a line that goes through the gas chambers, and everybody knew where these people are going. You couldn't help it. It was so terrible there. But we went through for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, they loaded us in trucks, and they took us to a labor camp called Dernau. To labor camp Dernau. Dernau was a rock quarry. As they dynamited the mountain and boulders were coming down, it was our job with sledgehammers to break them down to manageable pieces and throw it into the mining carts and run it down the hill till it be made gravel and then pull the carts back uphill. It was back-breaking work. I figured my uncle is not going to survive this. So I bribed the chef in the kitchen with my diamonds to give a job for my uncle in the kitchen. He took my diamonds and he did give him a job. It got a little easier on us. But every night when he came back from work, we had to line up in rows of 5. They would count you and then dismiss you, and you would go for your ration and go into your barrack. That one evening coming back, they count and they count and they count. And the commandant comes down with his Fräulein, with his girlfriend. And he says, I'm going to show the Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. My uncle was in front of me, my cousin was behind me, and as they're counting every 10th person, I can see that my uncle is going to be at 10, so I push him behind me, and I took his place. I figured he'll never survive a beating, so I took his place. They took us number 10 in the middle of the yard. They brought down bundles of 1 by 1 stakes about 2.5 feet long. And they brought down a sawhorse. A sawhorse. And this is what we had to do. Tiptoe in front of the sawhorse. Bend over without the stomach touching the 2 by 4 on the sawhorse. And and one man was pulling your trousers real tight, and the other one starts to hit with those stakes. And you have to count out loud. If you miscounted, you start from one again. If your heels touch the ground, you start from one again. If your stomach touches the 2x4, you start from one again. It was almost impossible. I was number 4. The first man walks up, tiptoes, they pull the trousers, and anyway he touches the 2x4, he touches the heel, again and again, start more and more from the beginning. Finally, and every time they hit him, there was a line of blood coming right through the trousers. They hit you so hard. He falls. When he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face, get up. He couldn't. He pulls out a revolver and shoots him right at the temple. His Fräulein, seeing this, she walks up to him and gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed a heroic act. He killed a man. Imagine. Number 2 goes up. He too miscounted. He touched the floor, touched the 2x4, start again and again. Finally he falls. The commandant goes over, shoots him right at the temple. Number 2. Number 3 goes up, the same way. But number 3 was a little younger. And he yells out, "Please have mercy on me, don't kill me." And the commandant says, "Then stand up, come over here and face me." He stands up, makes 5 steps, his knees gave out under him. The commandant goes over and shoots him. We have 3 dead bodies, and Ben Lesser is next in line. I shiver when I remind myself of this. I walk up to this sawhorse, tiptoe, bend over without touching the 2x4. One man is pulling my trousers real tight, the other one starts to hit, and I count out loud, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, finally 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, I made it. No one could believe that anyone could survive this. You can hear a pin drop in the whole camp. The man who was pulling my trousers tight says to me in Yiddish, "Go over and thank the commandant." So I stand up, blood is running down my legs. I walk up to him, I salute him, and I said, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant." Thank you, Herr Kommandant. When he hears that, he puts his hand on my collar, shirt collar, twists me around, facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now I told you it could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about." While this is going on, there's a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates who escaped. You couldn't recognize them. They were bloodied, black and blue. They were pulling them in. When the commandant saw that, Just like a child gets sick of a toy and throws it away. He tells all of us number 10 to go back in our line. He orders his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows to hang those 3 survivors. Well, we all had to watch. Everybody had to stand in line and watch while they're hanging them one by one. The third guy was a little younger, and he yells out, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu. That's a prayer before you die. It's only 6 words. Only 6 words. When they heard that, they kicked the stool out from under his feet. They wouldn't let him complete Adonai Echad, the last 2 words. They were such sadists, unbelievable. And then it's like nothing ever happened. We went to our rations and back to our bunks and showered. For weeks, I could not lay on my back. I had to lay on my stomach because the welts were so terrible. Terrible. Blue, mark, red, and bloodied. Don't ask. One night, we hear cannon fire. The front was closing in. That morning, we reported to go to work. There was a loudspeaker saying, no one is going to work today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up in rows of 5 and march out. Well, my uncle was already in the kitchen. We couldn't say goodbye to him. We never saw him again. Obviously, he didn't survive. And I am with my cousin. Now, in my book, I say that I marched for 3 or 4 weeks. Death March, because that was called a death march because if you could not keep up pace, they simply shot you. And I didn't know after a while, day and night, it was all mixed up. One day, 2 days, a month, we didn't know. But it seemed to me it was 3 or 4 weeks. Recently, I found out from a German professor. He says, Mr. Lesser, I read your book, and I loved it so much. He asked permission to translate it in German. We gave him this permission. He says, however, your father, he was telling this to my daughter, Gail, your father made 2 mistakes. One mistake was he said that he marched in the death march for 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Mr. Lesser marched 460 kilometers, 7 weeks. And he knows. And the other things that I was wrong, I'll tell you in a few minutes. Anyway, the last week or so, my shoes fell apart, and I was now marching in snow barefooted. Don't ask me how I survived that. To this day, I have problems in the bottom of my feet. When we arrived into a place called Buchenwald. Buchenwald was a major camp. They counted us, they told us to go into this barrack. They're going to feed you there, you can take a shower. This picture is of me inside the shower. I don't know how we got that picture. Some Nazi must have done it, but how they found it, I don't know. It's a whole story behind it. But we showered, they gave us fresh clothes, fresh shoes, everything. In the morning we had to be back on the same spot at 8 a.m. because Buchenwald is also being evacuated. So we did that. They counted us and they marched us out of Buchenwald. About a few hundred yards outside the camp, we see cattle cars lined up. And they count us 82 cattle car, and they told us to go in. I remember I told my cousin, I says, I'm going to help you go into the cattle car because he was very weak. I said, however, find a spot near a wall where we can rest our back, because I remember going to Auschwitz in the cattle car, people all around me, it was terrible. So he did. He found a good spot against the wall, and he saved one spot for me. And after 80 people got in, they closed up the door. An hour later, they opened the door, and they threw in 80 loaves of bread. A loaf of bread for each person. Now, those people next to the door were grabbing 4 or 5 breads. But those of us against the wall had nothing. We don't know where we're going for, how long we're going to be gone. I needed to get a bread. So I started to climb over the sitting inmates to get to the door and wrestle out the bread from somebody who had several of them. While I'm climbing of the inmates, one inmate had a pocket knife, and he didn't like the idea, and he stabs me. And I feel a stab, and blood is spilling out my mouth, but I can't stop. I have to get a bread. And finally I go to this guy at a few breads, and I pulled one away from him. He kicked me. I put it in my back pocket, and I go back to my cousin. He says, Ben, what's happening to you? You're bleeding. So I put my finger here, it went right through the tongue. I have a big gash. To this day, I still have a mark, but the mark is over my chin bone because I filled up when I was so skinny, it was in the middle of my throat. Anyway, I have this one loaf of bread in my pocket, and I ration it out between my cousin and myself about the size of a half an egg for each of us every day. No one could see that I have bread, they'd kill you for it. People are dying next to me, all around. People are dying. 1 week, 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, my bread disappears. I don't have any more left. But they shuttled us around for another week, 3 weeks. With this one loaf of bread, 2 weeks eating a little piece, the 3rd week nothing. Everybody around me dying. My cousin and I are still alive. And we arrived at a place called Dachau. they told us to march in over the tracks. And I remember there was raining the night before. There were puddles of water on the ground on the tracks. When we came out of the cattle car, the first thing we did, we fell down on the ground to wet our lips in that water. We were so dried out. We got that water. We didn't care if we get sick or not. We were just thirsty. Out of this cattle car, there were 80 people. Only 4 of us walked out in Dachau alive. The rest were all dead. We arrived in Dachau out of 7,000. In my book I say the train had 3,000. And this professor corrected me. The second mistake I made, that I said it was 3,000 people on that train. It was 7,000. And out of the 7,000, only 18 walked out alive. Today, I'm still the last survivor from that cattle car train. I was the last survivor in the last few years already. Everybody's dead. So anyway, I come in with my cousin inside the camp. We see a mountain full of dead bodies. Apparently they ran out of coal to burn the bodies in the crematorium. So they piled them up there, and they put my cousin and I right in a barrack next to these bodies. On the ground, they push us against the wall. 1 day, 2 days, we're sitting there laying on the ground. On the 3rd night, we hear Befreiung, Befreiung, Americans, Americans. I tell my cousin, let's go and find out what it is. So holding each other, we walk outside and we see the inmates are crawling on their hands and knees and kissing the boots of the American GI. They liberated us. We were free. And 2 GIs walk up to me, my cousin. One of them had a can of Spam. He opens it up for me and he hands it to me. We both made the big mistake. We ate some of it because we got dysentery. My cousin dies in my arm the night of liberation. And I hold him and I won't let him go. And they saw this, so they took him away. And I followed. I made 5 steps and my knees gave out. They pushed me to the side of the wall. 2 hours later, a man walks up, nicely dressed, and he asked me in a broken German what languages I speak. So I told him, and he hears Polish. I am a Polish Jesuit priest. I came here with nuns and doctors from Paris. We're opening up a field hospital in the yard of Dachau. I'm going to take you to that field hospital. And he picks me up like I was a sack of bones. I probably weighed about 60 pounds. And I was 16 years old at the time. He picks me up, he puts me on his shoulder, and he walks me to the infirmary. On the way, he's telling me what they did to the Jewish people is unheard drugs, unjust, unbelievable. Why? They didn't do any harm to anyone. However, he says, Benek in Polish, he says to me, don't you ever abandon your noble religion. To hear that from a Jesuit priest in 1945 is very unusual. You may hear it today, but not then. Anyway, I come to the infirmary, and nun comes out and puts me on a white cot with a white sheet on it. She takes my vitals, and I pass out. 2.5 months later, 5 weeks later, I wake up in a monastery in Bavaria called St. Tertullian in Bavaria. The monks gave up one building for the Jewish people. This is where I wake up. And my story just begins. There were 10 miracles that I survived to this point. And I asked myself, why? Why was I so lucky? And now you'll find out the story. Out of 4.5 billion people in the world in those days, I wind up with my sister Lola, the only survivor, except from the family of 5, and I. About two people away. Neither one of us knowing that we were there, and not knowing each other. And then I leave to go to Palestine. It's something you have to learn about, and the only way I can tell you is get my book. We will find out in my book the miracle of meeting my sister alive.
That's my dad. 95 years old. I can't believe he stood up the whole time. We got him 2 chairs, and he stood up the whole time. Well, I'm going to, what can I say? My dad speaks like this to not hundreds or, he speaks to hundreds of thousands of students and people a year. Hundreds of thousands of them a year. Some years he's spoken to over 1 million students between in-person, on Zoom, doing international Zooms. He doesn't charge for a single speaking event that he does. We don't charge for sharing anything on Zahor with teachers from all around the world. Please, I want you to look at this man. We started this foundation 14 years ago. He needed to do something besides leave a memoir. He needed to do something to leave a legacy for future generations. And I'll tell you, between my niece and I, we have been working nonstop ever since. And I am grateful for what my dad has not only given to me, but has taught my children and my grandchildren of what it means to really live a life that matters. Thanks, Chad. We're not allowed to sell books. We drove in from Las Vegas. We do have a list up here. Feel free, fill in your name. We have books with us. We could make arrangements to go to your house or call, leave your phone number, your email address. We will make arrangements. We also have an incredible audiobook that Ben has made with one of the top audiobook producers really in the country a couple years ago. Both are selling for $20 each, not selling, donating, but contact us, write your name on the list, and we will make it happen. And we also at Zahor, there's so much to tell you, and I'm not going to tell you. You've been here such a long time, and dinner is around the corner, I understand, but open your hearts, help us do what we do best, and what we will continue to do for generations to come. So, Anne, I know you wanted to finish up here, and that's it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know that, yes, Gail said dinner's right around the corner, but I just want, if you would just give me 6 minutes more. You know, Ben tells me that he has many sleepless nights, and when he has these sleepless nights, he has ideas how his lessons about the Holocaust can continue. And so one night he told me that he wanted to make a pamphlet for teachers. So we worked on that, and Carol McGrew is a teacher from Las Vegas as well, and his granddaughter and I, and Ben, we came up with the Zahor Holocaust curriculum, and you'll find that on his site. But I wanted to do more, and so under House Bill 60 in Utah, I went back to college. And so I went to college to study media production and film editing. And my goal is to make a documentary about Ben. And so we have been working on this. We have made 4 trips to Las Vegas, interviewing the Anti-Defamation League, another 100-year-old survivor, the ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial, the Gardens, Holocaust Gardens Memorial in Las Vegas, and we've just interviewed the Anti-Defamation League president, scores of people, and we have more than 20 hours of film, and we put together a few things. The college was kind enough, and students, 4 students decided to help me, and they did this on their own time. However, now they're back in school and taking on more things. I will tell you that when I started school 4 years ago, taking some courses, I could be these college students' grandmother. Now, last semester, I could be their great-grandmother. They stay 18, I get older. So I just want to show you a couple things we put together for the documentary now. The one is going to be an opening that we're testing. The second video is going to be very short, less than 2 minutes. And then the last video that I'm going to show you is the making of the 8-minute video that we did for the college. You will see, you won't recognize the people, but I just was taking pictures as we were making, filming one time when we were in Las Vegas. So please enjoy that, and also, if you want to stay after for question and answers, you're welcome to. And if you want to help us continue making the documentary, we have donation boxes over there, and we really appreciate it. Everyone has done this on their own time, and I sincerely want to do it to keep Ben's message alive. It's important for generations to come. So thank you.
I cannot take credit for these verses, if not for Ben Lesser, his persistence to forewarn the world, like one shouting from the rooftop, Zahor, remember. No, I cannot take credit for this literature. No, I am merely the delivery boy of a real-life story that needs to be told, that must be heard. Indeed, my words fall short. He is among the few that is left from the class of 45. Dare I say, a dying breed of living witnesses and surviving sufferers of the Holocaust. By the time I came into this world, Ben Lesser's life had already changed the world. By 11 years old, Ben Lesser saw what none of us should ever see. By 18 years old, Ben Lesser had already lived a lifetime, from Nazi nightmare to American dream.
Ben Lesser is a voice that fights against evil. He has shared his story, and he has humanized so many people to be able to understand the atrocities that took place during the Holocaust. We use lessons of the Holocaust, and we try to empower young people through stories from rescue during the Holocaust to be upstanders today.
We need to constantly have a means to be able to educate generation after generation what happened to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The Holocaust is not political. Anti-Semitism, hatred, bigotry, it's not political. It's about how do we stand up and make sure that these stories are told and never forgotten. I take incredible pride being one of the driving forces in this project, knowing that, when I'm not here any longer, there's going to be something tangible here to bring forward.
Life is the sum of choices. While individuals can't always choose what happens to them, but whether it's a crisis or calamity, people can choose to either let it ruin their lives or learn from it and move forward. It's essential to understand the consequences of personal choices. It's possible to let tragedy or trauma become a reason to stop living. But it's also possible to live through extreme circumstances and commit to a life that has meaning, a life that matters.
Write a letter to the world and say I'm sorry for the damage that we've done. We bleed the same, hearts beat the same, so why can't we just be the same? No, we don't have to leave out anyone. If I could send a message to the world and say I can't believe how far we've fallen down. When people stand in silence, just ignoring all the violence, then maybe now it's time that we speak out. always lose the blame. When finding heroes is so hard. And oh hey, it's time to say goodbye. Take the darkness and step into the light. 'Cause when we all come together and decide we will never ever hate again, then love will be stronger. So if we bleed the same, hearts beat the same, then why can't we just be the same? If I could send a message to the world, if I could write a letter to the world.
Thank you so much for being here today. I want to say that this song was written by musicians and artists from around the world after hearing Ben speak for, I think, a week, and they listened to him and they wrote these songs. So again, thank you for coming. I hope you've been inspired. We're going to leave. If you want a book or a cassette player, we'll have outside and inside where you can leave your name. I live here, so you'll see me and I can help you with that. Also, if you'd like to make a donation, we would appreciate it. If you buy the book on Amazon, Ben doesn't get anything from that. So if you would like a book, please sign here and we'll make sure you get them. Thank you again for coming. Thank you, Ben. We love you.
Do we have any questions?
Oh, forgot question and answer.
You're welcome to ask questions if you want. Or just come on up and ask a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, signed up. I don't think they have them. I don't think they have them. There's just something.
Yeah, if you can sign, I can find it.
I have to live.